My name is Adrian Nantchev, and this channel is all about helping you become a remarkable entrepreneur. So that's why I started this podcast, Become Remarkable, to find people from all over the world, whether entrepreneurs or not, to share with you their experience, their journey, their story, who they are, what they're doing, and why. Most importantly, why. I have with me today Shahidah. I think, are you in the States right now, or whereabouts are you? I'm just very curious. Shahidah.
Yes, I'm in New York City.
Ah, okay, that's fine. I couldn't tell. It was all over the place. From the States, again, that's pretty cool. So, Shahidah, what we normally do in this podcast, we have a carry-on question. So the guests from the previous lecture, guests from the previous podcasts ask you a question. So it's an icebreaker. So Ming Wu from Portsmouth, England, wants to know that if you had the chance to revisit a successful project, how would you ensure that it failed, so as to learn from your mistakes and learn from your past?
Wow, that's a good question.
It has to be good.
Wow, that's a good question. Wow, I don't, that's a good question. How do I ensure that it fails so that I can learn from the mistakes? I guess I would have to, let me think of a successful project that I had.
Well, I'll tell you what, while you're thinking, my answer to the question would be something on the lines of, like, when I started my first business in November 2014, it was e-commerce, selling video games. And how I would ensure it failed is I would essentially keep doing what I was doing, not really gaining an interest or caring about the sector or the industry, and doing what I was continuing to do. Because as soon as I launched the business, it plateaued. I didn't know what to do. First thing I ever done that was entrepreneurial, and it was like, what do I do? And I just was very curious and just kept learning and learning. I picked up a certain book about word of mouth and marketing, and then I started the second business. So how I would make sure I fail is I would keep doing what I was doing. And then in hindsight, years from now, which is like today, I'll look back at it and think, yeah, I did this wrong and that wrong and this wrong.
Okay. Well, I did have a previous blog that I was working on that I guess you could say, I don't want to say it wasn't successful because, you know, I have followers, I have a following, but it's not as successful as I wanted it to be. And the reason, like you said, like not having a passion for what I was doing, I thought the more I began to do it, the more I realized I really didn't have any idea about what I was doing. And if I would just keep on like not having idea, not trying to learn, and I guess taking cues from other people instead of using my own creativity to come up with ideas and be more authentic, then that would definitely ensure that I fail. So if I keep doing that, definitely. So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, some interesting stuff there, which we'll probably cover. So you mentioned passion. So what is it you're doing? And I was just reviewing the questions you submitted earlier, talking about, I want to say, languages. And there was an interesting quote that you remember someone saying to you that black women or black girls can't learn languages. And you thought, no, that's not true. So please, what do you do and why?
Okay. Well, like you said, my name is Shahidah, and I created Black Girls Learn Languages because I wanted to create a community of Black women who are learning languages or who know them already. And so what I do is I celebrate Black women of the African diaspora all over that speak more than one language. So I celebrate them as a means to motivate others to pick up another language. And then also I create and provide language learning content so that other people, it could help them, whether practically like, oh, I didn't know that, and help them in their pursuit of learning a language, or they may see it and think, oh, that's cool, I can do that. So I also celebrate Black men on Man Crush Monday because I don't want to completely alienate them. But my focus is Black women because I'm a Black woman and I'm doing this out of my own experience. And it's really, I guess, quite unbelievable, you could say. I always loved languages. I guess you could say I came out the womb because I grew up in New York City and I grew up in Bushwick. And I guess they call it now Williamsburg because they've gentrified Brooklyn, but that's another story for another day. But I grew up in Bushwick, and it was an area where there was a lot of Spanish speakers. Like you could go to a store and they don't speak English. And so I grew up hearing Spanish, picking up words, picking up phrases, and I just loved it. And so when I started to branch out and learn French and German, and I would have conversations with people, they would be really shocked, or they couldn't believe it, or they felt like, oh, well, maybe that's her heritage. That's why she knows that. And it's not. I'm just a regular Black girl from Brooklyn that just like languages. I'm not like, I don't have a parent from Haiti or a parent from Costa Rica or anything like that. So it's just something I took upon myself to learn. And I couldn't believe that people really just doubted my ability to know languages and speak languages. So that's why I started it. That's part of why. And also when I was learning languages, I didn't really see anyone that looked like me learning languages that I could kind of connect with and say, hey, this is hard. What are you doing? That was a while ago. I'm a little old, but that was a while ago. So, that's the reason why I started it, because I know that there's other people out there, and I just want to bring them together.
Yeah, excuse my ignorance though, but what is Man Crush Monday?
Man Crush Monday is it's Instagram. Do you have Instagram?
Yes.
Okay, it's one of the hashtags on Instagram. So they have like Man Crush Mondays is when you show a picture of a guy that you think is hot, and that's your man crush, and you just show him on Monday. And then they have Women Crush Wednesday. So if you have a woman crush, you can show a picture of someone you think is hot, and that's basically what that is.
Right, okay, I understand that now. Okay, so I'm just curious then, because you mentioned these different languages in Bushwick, those other areas. I don't know, I've been to New York City like twice, but that was, I don't know, it's Manhattan area, the main island. I'm not quite sure which one that is, but the main part, NYC. So you say that people were surprised that you were speaking their language, you're not from Haiti. What's the languages like in the States? What's the problems? What's the thing that you're championing?
Well, I have to say that here in the U.S., regardless, it doesn't matter if you're Black or white or whatever your demographic is, I have to admit we do have the lowest demographic, the lowest population of people that speak more than one language here in the U.S. So that's one thing. And that in an era where there are a lot of jobs that require you to speak another language, namely Spanish. Spanish is almost like an unofficial de facto language here, because there are so many people from the Caribbean, Central America, South America that come here and, don't speak English. So that's one of the things that I'm trying to conquer, I guess you could say.
I'm just curious, though, also, because I remember seeing a statistic that Spanish is like the third or fourth or fifth most spoken language in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Number one was technically, it was Mandarin, because by sheer population in China, but globally speaking, it was English. And then it was Spanish or Hindu, so something along that. But what do you think to this like trend that's happening 20, 40, 100 years or something like that, where they say learning Mandarin or Cantonese is much more valuable, or maybe even Russian, the BRICS nations, is much more valuable than learning English, or from say, because international world, globalization and such, learning those languages alongside English and maybe Spanish is beneficial. What are your thoughts on that?
I see so many different statistics all the time. Like I see a statistic that says in 2050, French is going to be the second most widely spoken language based on the current population and trends in business. And then I see something that says Mandarin is going to be the most widely spoken language. So I don't know. I personally think in terms of as far as where we are right now, I don't see English going away for a while just because there still is a need for English teachers still. I don't see that, like just me personally going into that field, I don't really see that as something that's declining rapidly. If it does decline, it is going to be a slow decline. Depending on how China positions itself, then yes, I could see that happening, but it really, really depends on how they choose to position themselves in the global economy. There are other languages that are slowly creeping up, like Portuguese, because Brazil is slowly becoming more powerful in the grand scheme of things. And that is a language that is going to be probably in the top 5 soon. As you saw, they had the Olympics and then they also had the World Cup. So, these things, people are trying to do business in Brazil. So I see that coming up, probably be in the top 5, definitely. I'm sure it's in the top 10 right now. So it just all depends. We just have to wait and see because anything could happen. China could not be positioned to be a force to be reckoned with, and it could change very quickly. Anything can change.
You said earlier that language is love. What did you mean by that?
Language is love?
Yeah, you said that, didn't you, earlier?
No, I don't think so.
Oh, that's all
I
right.
think I think I said I love languages. I think that's what I said. I love languages. I've always loved languages. I don't know why. I couldn't tell you why. I don't know why. I just like to be able to speak another language. I think it's a nice feeling. It's expression of yourself. I don't want to say it's fashion like that. I don't want to go that far, but it is definitely artistic in a way that you can express yourself because different languages have different ways of expressing ideas. And like, for instance, there's a word in English, the word mind, and like in German, that word doesn't really exist. You know what I mean? So, or like, for instance, there's a word in German for, like if you feel like doing something, like in English, we don't really have, I mean, you could say desire, but not really, but there's a word for that in German that you can say, like, it's just one word. It means I don't want to do it or I want to do it. And it just expressed like just your feeling. And I like that there's different ways to express yourself in different languages. And yeah, that's what when I say I love languages, that's one of the things I love about them.
Yeah, I can remember seeing somewhere that in a video talking about how there's certain words. There's a certain word in like Indonesia talking about how fast you can eat something, and there is no equivalent to that in English.
Right.
And if you in English want to say that, you have to do all these long descriptive words. Interesting bit of psychology as well, what's called a schema, schema, where you can just say one word and it means and encapsulates all these different concepts or terminology or instructions.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why that's why language is very interesting as well. Because rather than saying, sit down on the chair, you just say relax, for example.
Right.
Language is very, very fascinating in that way.
Mm-hmm.
And so, how are you teaching it? How are you teaching language? Because you mentioned, I think I read something about your own platform, or how are you doing it online or?
Well, yes, right now I haven't started yet doing like a class with formal teaching plans. I haven't started that yet, but that is coming. Right now, I'm actually doing a 30-day Spanish challenge. So every day doing a little bit in Spanish, something, whether it's testing reading skills, writing skills, listening skills, speaking skills, learning. So right now, that's the one thing that I am doing that is a little bit more hands-on. Everything else is kind of passive. I just mostly reshare content that I have found useful to me, that has helped me. And basically tell people, I have some videos on YouTube. I actually have to upload some more, but I have some videos basically explaining what I did to help me become the fluent in whatever language and what resources I use. So basically, it's more of a general approach. Like this is some suggestions, what you can do. This is the process that I use that helped me. So that's basically what I'm doing. Eventually I will move, like I said, more to like maybe a webinar format where it's like formal lesson plan, goal plan, study plan, what have you.
Yeah, I understand. The 30-day challenge, that kind of reminds me of Duolingo, where you have to maintain like a certain amount of questions or do a certain amount of points every day.
Mm-hmm.
Do you base your teaching off Duolingo, or is it just completely separate your own experience and knowledge?
Yeah, right now it's just complete. It's kind of a refresher for me. So I thought, why don't I just, while I'm refreshing, also help somebody else? So that's why I started the challenge, because I thought I could kill two birds with one stone. So I'm not using Duolingo, but I am opening up the dialogue because I'm not providing the end all be all with the resources. I'm just providing, hey, this is what I know as far as this, and they're invited to come across some other stuff using their own resources or using the resources that I have on my website that I suggested, like that. So they can use Duolingo, they cannot, but I am providing, like, hey, this is what I know and there's more. Tell me what more you find out, just to make it interactive like that.
All right, so as a quick side note then, I remember reading something about TESOL,
Mhm.
TESOL, and other
Mhm.
online certificates.
Mhm.
Do you have any of those?
I do have an online certificate, and the thing is with online certificates, depending on who they're, I guess, accredited by, the online certificates, some countries, like if you want to teach English as a second language or a foreign language, some countries will accept the online certificates, but the online certificates sometimes don't give you the last piece, which is how to create a reading plan, like a lesson plan for reading, how to create a lesson plan for practicing writing or whatever. So it's like it teaches you techniques for teaching. It teaches you an understanding of how to teach English. And so it is good. It teaches you all the theory, but as far as the application portion that you usually get in the live classes, you do kind of miss that. But I did notice the other day, Coursera, they have classes on teaching English as a foreign language. And I would suggest, I have a friend who actually took it and recommended it to me. So I would suggest, if you don't want to go the traditional route of paying to go to in classes to teach, you could supplement it with Coursera, because there is peer review of the assignments. So even though Coursera is not accredited per se, you do get, I think Coursera is really good. I've learned a lot from different courses. And actually, Coursera has foreign language courses. They have a Spanish foreign language course, I noticed lately. They didn't used to, but they do now. And they also have I believe, a Chinese course if you want to learn Mandarin.
Yeah, Coursera is amazing. I've learned a lot from there as well. Business and marketing stuff. Not so much
Mm-hmm.
language, but that's interesting to look into. Because I want to know, how are you going about teaching it? With the lesson plan, the writing, and the techniques and understanding. How do you structure it all?
Yeah, that's something I'm going to have to learn, because that wasn't supplied to me in the course that I took. So that's something that you can learn. And it's not something that you can learn. For instance, you could volunteer and learn that. A lot of language schools sometimes will train you. I've noticed that too. If you go to another country, depending on the country, because every country is not the same and every language school is not the same. But some language schools, as long as you have a bachelor's degree and you have business experience, they will just train you their way of teaching English. So like, let's say the school is named John Doe's Business School or Business Language School or what have you. Then sometimes, even though you don't have that certificate, they will just teach you the John Doe way of teaching. You know what I mean? So there's a variety of ways that you can gain that experience. So it's up to the person, whatever they want to do. If they want to go ahead and try to go to a language school that will give them a full training, or if they want to go to a school that'll give them full training and pay, or if they want to use resources online and get that same education for free.
I saw recently on Groupon there was
Mhm.
there's an offer to get the TESOL certificate. Rather than
Mhm.
£400, what's that in dollars? What, 500 or 470? It was for $9.
$9.
Yeah, 98% discount. Is that good, bad, or ugly?
I would be skeptical of a $9 deal. Like if you would have said like that it was $100 or 100 and something bucks, it's like, okay, let me look into it. But $9, I don't know. I mean, in the kind of time that we live in right now, you could get a certificate in something, and even though it's not accredited, it still counts for something depending upon the employer. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I've gotten a certificate in something and I've mentioned it to an employer that I learned such and such techniques, such and such, terminology, such and such practices, etc. And, I could show that I had the knowledge because of the certificate. So even though it wasn't accredited per se, they did take into account, okay, well, she does have knowledge of this subject. So
Yeah.
it's $9. So, or £9. I'm sorry. I keep saying dollars. It's £9. So £9 I guess it's not a terrible amount to lose, but at the same time, it just depends on what you want to do, what you're trying to do, what employer, or if you want to work for yourself. If you just want to work for yourself and just tutor or freelance, then I guess it doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, I agree. It seems to be the qualification will do nicely. Well, as long as they're happy with it, and I think bottom line wise, as long as you're teaching the proper grammar, punctuation, and beyond, no problems.
Right.
Yeah. So, what's your teaching style? What do you think it's like? Firm but
Mine?
fair? Yeah, yours. What's yours?
I think that's a good question. I have to say, I do love to teach people things. That's just something I've always liked to do. I've always loved to teach people things. It doesn't even have to be language. Like, I could teach somebody. I'm a hair and beauty enthusiast besides language. So I would love, like, for instance, I would love to tell someone, oh, I found this perfect hair extensions and I found this way that you can put it in and da da da. Or I found this makeup from this brand and teach someone how to use it. Like, I love to like show people things because I feel like when they learn things that they want to learn, that adds value to their life in any way. It doesn't matter what it is. If you teach them how to cook something, I just like to do that. So as far as my teaching style goes, with that said, I would say that I am probably, I don't know how to say this, strict but not strict. Like, it depends. I think I am very case by case when it comes to teaching. So if I see that you want to learn, like, I see the desire there, I'm going to be more willing to help you and probably let you slide. And if I see that you're just kind of like, I'm just here because I have to be here, then I'm probably going to be very strict.
That's with the student, if how they feel.
Yeah, but I guess that's in general too. I guess that's in general too, but yeah.
I always felt that I would be firm but fair, very very informative,
Mm-hmm.
and I also suspect that over time a lot more comfortable with it, a lot more crazy, so to speak, but crazy but not crazy, kind of about it. Crazy in a funny kind of way.
Okay, so when you say crazy, do you mean like for instance, you have this innovative way that you're going to teach this concept that's a little like outside the box kind of crazy, you mean?
Yes.
Okay.
Among other ways that I can't yet conceive because of whatever, but yeah, it wouldn't be boring, no. No, thank you. So, what is it you're working on now then?
Right now, as far as the Black Girls Learn Languages.
Yeah.
Right now I'm just working on developing content that other people find useful, because the bottom line is this is for them, this is not for me. So, I'm trying to think of, trying to research what are their pain points, what are things that people have a problem with learning languages, because I come across a lot of people that they either think they can't learn a language, they think it's so difficult, they think it's so time consuming, and it's really not. Like, I had someone the other day, she just moved to Germany. I used to live there. I don't know if I mentioned that, but I lived there for 6 years. So she was telling me like, oh, what's a good language school that I could go to? And I was just like, why? Like, I lived in Germany and I learned how to speak fluent German without even paying anyone. And especially back then, we didn't have like the cell phones and the internet like we have now. So even now that we have all of that, like there's no need to really pay a language school. And I told her, honestly, you could do that on your own. There's so much available at your fingertips. There's TV, there's newspapers, there's magazines, there's people, and then, I don't care what anybody says. I said this on one of my videos. There's dating apps, like you're in Germany. I think dating is a great way to have that interaction because most people are not going to interact just for the sake of, unless they're trying to learn English. And sometimes that's a little hard to find. So one thing I always suggest is once you get to a certain level, yeah, if you live in that country, I would definitely start dating. I mean, because let's be honest, you usually don't get past like the first couple of dates anyway, so it's good interaction.
The interesting way of learning a language. Never thought of that. I was just thinking Coursera at the very least. Going to the country, and then you mentioned like newspapers, and I thought, oh, Coursera is good as well.
Yeah, there's different ways. I also suggest whatever you find online, podcasts, anything.
You also said some videos, and you mentioned YouTube earlier.
Mm-hmm.
What's your channel about?
It's the same. I have I have an introduction video where I basically say, this is who I am. This is what I'm doing. Stay tuned. And then the other videos are more like, I have one video that's actually a rebuttal to another video. It's called Being Black in Germany. And, I came across this video. It came up in my newsfeed because of the type of videos I watch. I watch like language videos and stuff like that. So it came up in my newsfeed and I watched it and I liked the video, but there was this is aside from language, but, I didn't like the comments. The comments were I don't know how to say this. The comments came off very jealous. I don't know. Of the girl. The girl was just basically explaining what her experience is like being a Black American woman in Germany. And a lot of the comments just seemed like, I don't know. So I just basically wanted to rebut the comments. And then some things that she did say in the video that weren't necessarily the way that she explained, at least in my experience, it wasn't. So that's one video that's not necessarily related to language. But then the other ones are like techniques for this is how to improve your reading, your listening, like that. So basically, the rest of my videos are going to be that. Every once in a while, I may discuss something that's related to that, like as far as travel or living abroad, because I believe language and travel does go hand in hand. So, but for the most part, it's mostly going to be how to do this, how to just helping people with the learning language process.
Yeah, travel is a damn good way of learning language. Something I need to work on myself, but priorities and stuff like that. And you mentioned these videos with regards to like the common mistakes. What are some of the common pitfalls that people have when they're learning English?
Learning English? I can't imagine because English is hard, especially American English, because I feel bad for people who learn because sometimes, especially in Europe, they learn British English, which is different. I'm sure you can attest to that. And sometimes the spelling is different or it's just said a different way than we would say it here. So sometimes I have people ask me to correct them and say, is this correct? And most Americans don't have any kind of idea about how British people speak English. I have an idea. I mean, I don't know, but I've spoken to enough people to kind of have an idea how they communicate. So it's hard when they're coming to Americans and Americans are telling them like, that's completely incorrect. When in actuality it is. It's correct. It's just we don't say it that way. So that's one of the things that's a pitfall is the I guess you could say the dialect, depending on what English you're learning. So you have to be consistent. For instance, if you're going to learn American English, then you need to be in contact with American people and American media like that. Or if you decide you want to learn the Queen's English, then you need to make sure you're being consistent there, watching TV from the UK, whatever the case may be, listening to podcasts, listening to radio, reading things. You have to be consistent, because if you're mixing the two, and then don't even get started on Australian English, because I have to be honest, I don't understand Australian people sometimes. So if you're mixing these different versions of English, international English, that's going to be a problem. And so that's the one thing I would suggest. Make sure whatever you're learning is consistent to that dialect or whatever you're learning.
Yeah, I recently heard, I was told that the way I spelt specialize, I was spelling it with a Z by accident. I didn't realize that was the American way of spelling it. It's Word, Microsoft Word's like defaulting, to Z. And I was told that in England, when it comes to a business report or a business article or something to do with business, if you spell it the American way, apparently it's a bit negative, because it's seen as lazy. Apparently, because people might think, oh, you just copied it from online and you didn't correct it, or you didn't write it yourself because it's spelt wrong. So, yeah, I can understand why you want to get the right spelling, right dialect.
I didn't know that. Learn something new. So, can I ask, I know this is your interview, but I'm just curious now that you mentioned that. So, what do people think of, like, I know we have different accents, like people from down south and people from up north, but what do, I guess, British people think of, like, Americans in general when it comes to how they speak English?
I do remember this thing about how some Americans think they speak better English than English people. Nothing particularly from me comes to mind. And for me personally, also, I the accents wise, from say New York City to California, I understand it perfectly. Similar with the UK, all over the UK, there's different accents. I understand them very easily, very perfectly. So I personally never had a problem. Can't always tell, in the States, for example, I can't always tell where someone is from, but if it's a Californian accent, I can understand it just as easily as as a New York accent. But over here, the stereotype, the States, maybe sloppier language, maybe like sloppier words, maybe like the Bible Belt or down south, maybe in the Rust Belt, I'm not sure, but maybe just sloppier, not speaking proper English. That's really it.
That's interesting.
Yeah, just from my experience.
Okay. That's crazy, because I don't know. You know what's so funny and it's so crazy? I don't know if this is the general consensus, but I know quite a few people who think this, but it's like as far as the way British people speak English, obviously, well, the people I associate with, we obviously think, okay, that's like the highest English. And I don't know, we just always think it's like really, really like refined and classy. Like, that's how we think of it when we like think of British English. Again, I'm not speaking for everyone in the US, just like the people that I know, like myself. And, I just think that's so crazy, like how people can come to conclusions about the way people speak a language.
No, massive stereotype. Possibly 80% population, fine, normal, generally speaking. 20%, terrible. One reason or another, the stereotype of the teeth or stuff like that, or education or whatever. But no, that's a big stereotype. Down south especially, the accent's a lot more clearer to understand. And generally speaking, the further north you go, the accent is much more unique in its own characteristics, and the dialect is much more profound. So that's a massive stereotype for the UK.
Okay.
But
okay.
Yeah. So as we wrap up this podcast, though, Shahidah, what is the best way for the audience to get in touch with you?
Well, the absolute best way, I have to admit, is Instagram. I am heavily on Instagram. I'm going to be honest, that's probably the best way that they can get in contact with me is Instagram. But they could also go to my website, which is www.blackgirlslearnlanguages.co, not .com. I know a lot of people use .com, but I thought that was kind of modern, I guess, .co. There's also, they can contact me by email. My email is contact@blackgirlslearnlanguages.co. They can contact me also by Twitter. I'm not really on Twitter like that. I just go on Twitter when I feel like I have something to say, which is not very often. Maybe once a week or once every 2 weeks, I may go on Twitter, say a couple of things, get off. And I guess I have a Facebook group and a Facebook page as well. So if they join the Facebook group, that's great because I also share resources in there as well. And they could also like the page. I share content that's relevant.
Yeah, I think a .io domain is much more trendy these days, especially a tech company, .io, as opposed to .co.
Yeah, I think you're correct.
That's all right. Yeah, so I'll include those links below in the show notes. Twitter, though, I barely use that as well. But yeah, I'll include those. And for the next guest, what question do you want them to answer? As a carry-on question.
The last person asked me a great question. I'm like, how can I live up to that? The question that I would like to ask them. The question I would like to ask is if they had $40,000, what would they do with it in regards to their company, you know, whether they want to invest in, you know, whatever they want to do with it. What would they do with that $40,000 right now?
And what would you do with $40,000? For me, I'll give you time to think. For me, I would, get a virtual assistant to work on a few little small miscellaneous things to free up a bit more of my time. Mm-hmm. With 40,000, put say 5 to 10% of that, or 15 to 20% of that, in investments in different asset classes, without going too deep or complicated. The majority of that, also keep another 20 to 40% of that on hold, the cash reserve, and the remaining percentage, I would split up 50% or so, keeping liquid for upcoming recession between now and 2020. But also the remaining 50% would be used for this other company that I'm starting with a business partner. But that would be budgeted. It wouldn't be like here's this money, let's blow it, all the rest. It would be here's the reserve, but let's try and replace that through marketing or crowdfunding or angel investing. So that I would divide it in some ways. And also now I think about it, I'll also actually split it in different ways. With some 1 or 2% of that will go to charity over the next year or so. 20% of that, 30% of it will go into assets and investing as an investor to create more money, creating a cash flow, and a few other things like that. So without going too deep and complicated, that's what I would do. But what about yourself?
That's a good question. I definitely would invest a good bit of it. I'd probably invest half of it. I'm not sure how I would invest it. I'm pretty sure that I don't know. I'd probably split it up between long-term and short-term investment. And then half of the part that I did not do in the short-term and long-term investment, I probably would try to look into making some small scholarships via Black Girls Learn Languages to help people who are trying to study abroad or who are majoring in certain languages, for instance. My ultimate goal is be able to fund a fellowship where they can go and do 10 months abroad to get work experience or what have you. And I'm pretty sure that's not going to cover all of that. But in the meantime, I would definitely like to try to fund some scholarships with some of that money as well.
That's cool. That's cool. Scholarships for students to join your platform, yeah?
Well, not to join my platform, but just to help them. I mean, the platform, obviously, it would be in the name of the platform, the scholarship. So it would be, I guess, Black Girl Learn Languages Scholarship. And it could be one of the scholarships maybe for Spanish majors or for Japanese majors or for people who are studying abroad in such and such fellowship, what have you. So it would be small ones like, it would just probably be a bunch of small ones, like 500, 1,000, 2,000, like that.
I understand. And also, I want to introduce one more thing to the podcast before we end this.
Okay.
A challenge. For the listeners at home, what challenge do you give them?
What challenge do I give them?
To improve themselves or to stretch their comfort zone.
The challenge I give is to be present. Be present in everything you do. Very often, we have a tendency to go into autopilot with a lot of things, no matter what it is, whether it's typing an email or talking to someone about something that you're very knowledgeable in or studying or what have you. And I just challenge them to be present when they're dealing with people, when they're working on things with their business, and try not to go on autopilot and think of other things. Just try to focus on that.
Yeah, I used to have this philosophy that I coined 15 years ago, something like that, which was think of the now. Think of the now, because yesterday is gone, tomorrow's on its way. So treasure and value the current moment now, savor the relaxing or the food or whatever. But then also at the same time, kind of like an add-on to that, make it so that tomorrow, next week, next month is slightly easier or profitable or more relaxed or laid back than it is today. Thinking long-term wise. So that's my response to that. That's what I think. So, so Shahidah, thanks a lot for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks a lot. And so, ladies and gentlemen at home, if you haven't already, click on the subscribe button below and press the bell notification right next to it for the latest uploads. And remember that challenge from Shahidah is to be present in all you do. So I'm very curious, how are you going to do that? So stay tuned for the next episode where we ask the carry-on question. How cool would that be? But remember that this channel is all about helping you become a remarkable entrepreneur. So go out there today and do something remarkable, because that is what it's all about.